Welcome to another episode of the How to Do Your 20s podcast. And in this episode, I have Nick from Pink Gloves Boxing. And Nick is a writer, motivational speaker, producer, actor, former three-time national champion, two-time All-American collegiate football player, and currently one of the owners of Pink Glove Boxing at Pink Gloves Boxing, a boxing program for women aimed at not only helping women get into better shape, but empowering them to be more confident as well. So, Nick, tell me a little bit about your story and what led you specifically to get involved with Pink Gloves Boxing.
Well, first, thanks for the nice introduction. I need to have that on file when I wake up. Thank
Absolutely.
you, Travis.
Yeah.
What got me into Pink Gloves was something that we were kind of talking about before, is wanting a greater purpose. And after finishing college, I was a part of a successful program. Whether or not it was successful, though, what was the best part was the camaraderie that we developed. And, I mean, there was a real brotherhood in collegiate football. Mm-hmm. And we were at a small enough level where we knew, like, we weren't the best athletes. We weren't the biggest or the strongest. But I'd venture to say that we were probably one of the smartest teams around. Mm-hmm. And, we had a huge amount of love for each other. And even in our league, we were small. But I think that love kind of transcended. And I know that sounds kind of funny to say in football, but it really existed. And then it's over. Like, football is one of those sports. It's just, boom, you're done.
Yep.
And, there's this big void. And so I go into engineering. I had that corporate job in the glorified cubicle. And it was okay, but I felt I lost that camaraderie, that team that's going towards a higher vision, a purpose together. Mm-hmm. And I realized that was something that I really wanted and really enjoyed. So I partnered with, did you have a question?
No. Tell me a little bit more. So then, why Pink Gloves Boxing specifically?
Yeah, so at that point, I partnered with Garrett Garrels, and he was a football teammate of mine. And he said, hey, I have this program. I'm training about 10 women. One of them is my mom. So every now and then I drive to Anaconda, Montana, where he's from, and train him. So he asked me to come along. I thought, hey, this is pretty cool. And then about a month later, he asked if I'd like to be a co-owner and actually make it a business and make it big. And I said no. This is your baby. Think about it for a little bit. A month later, he asked me, and I said, all right, let's make it happen. And then I ended up quitting my engineering job, and we were in my Subaru making a road trip to Chicago to sell the program. And what's funny is, and kind of the reason I've kind of hesitated, why did I get into it, is it's changed, to be honest. At first it was I wanted to do something amazing. I had so much to share with the world, I had all the answers kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it's been really humbling working with so many amazing women at all ages and see what they can offer, because, we say did we found Pink Gloves, but really it's Pink Gloves is what helped founded me and who I've become. And it's I grew up with two brothers, so I didn't quite understand all the issues going on with women. And I think spending more time empowering has also allowed me to see other ways that we can empower and help each other more. And so spending more time in it, I'm a huge advocate of helping each other out, being supportive, and encouraging, and still keeping the challenge in. That's so important, that moment of heightened experience that we don't have often in our lives. Mm-hmm. Pink Gloves can offer that too. So it's great.
Something I found really interesting about your story is you took a $50,000 pay cut. And if I'm correct, it was a $50,000 doing civil engineering down to $0 doing the Pink Gloves. And what was a lot of people, that's a scary thought of jumping off, making a decent living to all of a sudden making nothing. What really fueled you? What was the final decision maker to say, money's not everything?
At that time, I had just had a pretty messy breakup with my college girlfriend. Mm. And I think that stirred the pot, and it got me thinking. And what I put in that void were books and and conversations with new people, and it really opened my mind about what is possible, and would I be comfortable just in this job that I didn't really feel I was enjoying, and is that where I wanted to be for the next couple of decades? And to me, the answer was a clear no. So that, I think it was the catalyst with the breakup, finishing college, being done with football. Right when you're off of the track that we're conditioned to go on,
Mm-hmm.
you got elementary, then you go middle, and then high school. Some of us go to college after that. But what do you do? I mean, then the world's your oyster.
Mm-hmm.
And I got pretty knee deep into all these success books. Some of them were good, some of them repeated what other ones said,
Mm-hmm.
but they all offered something. And reflecting on that, I said, I want to do more. And yeah, that's kind of how it started.
I had a very similar story. I was telling you before the podcast where I was making a good living, and I think a similar thing, a little bit of adversity sometimes is a really good thing. A little bit for you, it was the breakup. For me, it was just a general sense of dissatisfaction leads to both of us actually starting businesses. And I really admire what you did. You took a route of doing a business not just for profit, but trying to make change. And why a business trying to do change rather than just trying to make more money, and specifically helping women?
Yeah. So again, the change aspect, I think it's we want to, a lot of us, the people who are trying to actualize as best that they can and take these hard paths that lead to more adversity. You're trying to figure out what your significance is. Oftentimes, and it's like, why am I important?
Mm-hmm.
And some of it's ego driven. It's like, hey, I want to be known. I want to have some glory, be remembered, leave a legacy. And it, it's what I have found is the only time that the ego becomes an issue is when you don't address it. So you have to say, hey, you exist. I'll put you in check a little bit, but it's part of the soul, and it's
Mm-hmm.
going to bubble up. So we have to work with it. And so at first that was more valuable than the 50,000 in Montana, which, like anywhere else, it's double that.
Yeah.
It's just Montana's cost of living so low. And so, yeah, meaning by far, it's anyone in their 20s who's a little idealistic. I think they'll say the same thing. It's like it's about meaning. You got to do something with your life. So that was a
Absolutely.
no-brainer.
Yeah. Any
Um,
tips for picking a good cause to be a part of? Like how that's something that I've struggled with a lot is there's so many charitable organizations. Something I want to do is volunteer my time, but it's kind of a little bit of a problem of, well, who needs it the most? Like who needs my time the most? Any tips for the people out there looking to be part of a cause? How to pick one?
yeah, is getting involved in a lot.
Okay.
So I would say right away, say yes to everything, and then you're going to start to say no to a lot more things. So it's like and you'll find when the time is right, because there's that phrase: if you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll find when those passions and causes become clear, that if you say yes to something else and you take away from what you really want to do, you'll feel that angst again. So
Mm-hmm.
then you have to start cutting back and saying, no, now I need to guard certain things. And those things start to become the passions. And once you get proficient, you get some mastery at it, whatever the topic might be. With a sport, it's a simple analogy. The better you get at it, the funner it is to do.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say if you're speaking or you're running a podcast, or the better you get at it, the funner it is. And that
Absolutely.
opens new avenues. And being in a business that you start, one of the nice things is you talk to a lot more people.
Mm-hmm.
So then, communication skills, those things can translate. But my best advice is get involved as many things as possible, because that's going to help you develop yourself and find which areas you might have a natural talent for and which areas you have a natural passion for. It's kind of like that Venn diagram. And if you really have the passion and it's not in the Venn, you'll spend more time, and that talent will become hard earned. So
Absolutely. I know you co-authored a book called Loops for Life. Can you tell me a little bit about that story?
Yeah, so Garrett and I, and again, like Garrett, co-founder of Pink Gloves, um, and we lived together We played football together. He just kind of became my best friend. And it was kind of funny because when we're playing football, we weren't the best friends, but through the course of working on Pink Gloves, we really grew out that friendship and, went through a lot of adversity together. And that always helps bring a true friendship together.
Hmm.
We were doing goal setting one day. Um, it was kind of earlier on when we were just starting out, and we had the two of us plus our intern, which
Hmm.
sounds kind of cool, but he was just a year younger and he was a senior in college. And we did goal setting, and we both had on that list write a book. So we thought, hey, let's do this together. And we just wanted to summarize as best we could what we thought living a good life was about. And it came in three basic parts. And the first was personal. And so we follow the story of a football player at Carroll College, Montana, and that's where we were from, Carroll College. And he's working his way through and trying to understand how to be the best he could be.
Hmm.
And then he finishes that phase of life. And then he goes on to this career phase. It was about how to be the best there. And then he had a lot of money in his account. And then he kind of entered that third phase, which is what's the meaning behind all this? And it was just our attempt to best summarize that. And the truth is, writing it was more learning than anything else.
Hmm.
And I always encourage everyone to journal, if not write something of their own.
What would you say the major takeaways from the book for the reader's perspective would be then?
The major perspectives are to, well, in that first phase, it's about goal setting and being very clear on goals,
Hmm.
and then so you can achieve those goals. Um, I could talk a lot about goal setting, so I'll just kind of leave it at that.
Okay.
The career phase was really about how to think differently and how to provide value to people. It basically, I love taking a thought, and it might be that you're like, that's just the way it is, and that's fine, but I love tracing it back to, like, why is it that way?
Hmm.
Even if it doesn't change anything I do in my life, I want to consciously be mindful of why a pencil is made the way it is, because then when you hold it, you have a better respect for it. And let's take that example for business. Why do we work? And, getting all philosophical about it. And at the base of it is, if you can provide value in the form of a product or a service, then you'll make more money, because that's kind of how we're gauging what value you can provide. So
Hmm.
the higher the value, the more you should be able to either make money or at least sustain your livelihood. So that's the business phase of, getting philosophical about what value can I provide to others.
Sure. I want to touch on something you said earlier, and you were talking about being very mindful of why a pencil is made the way it is, or why, anything in a business is a certain way. And something I find really interesting is I think right around their 20s is when a lot of people start to realize that just because for instance, something's a law doesn't mean that it's right. And I have actually,
Hmm.
a lot of people I know, older people too, they're like, well, we need to do this. And I'm like, why? Well, it's the law. Okay, doesn't mean it's a good law, doesn't mean it doesn't need change. And I think that's something that people really need to start thinking about is just because something's a certain way doesn't mean it's the best way or the correct way.
Hmm. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's a cool thought. I do think that our generation, like the millennials,
Hmm.
are very defiant, almost to a fault, right? Like if
Yeah,
we doubt something, right away it's to the phone, Google search, and it's like, well,
absolutely.
sometimes that gets in the interference of just having a relationship and a good conversation. But
That's me. Yeah.
yeah,
That's I'm always wanting to argue about something, and you're right. That is a fault of our generation specifically for sure.
something to just keep in check, because it's also a good thing to, question everything, question why.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I know you also do some motivational speaking, and I actually watched. You have a video up of a speech you gave at a high school graduation, And one of the stories I thought was really interesting was the story about the puddles, and specifically Puddle Theory, which is an interesting theory to have, an interesting thing to have a theory on. Can you talk a little bit about Puddle Theory and the story behind it?
Yeah, well, thanks. I'm flattered that you watched that. Um, Puddle Theory is, I had a really, really good friend in college. I wouldn't have expected it. He wasn't a football player. He didn't even go to college. It was just I met him while I was in college, and that was the town he grew up in. And his name was Keith. We were hiking in the beautiful, gorgeous mountains of Montana, and it was in the spring. It was raining all day, but we went to this place that was beautiful if we could just get there.
Hmm.
And so we start walking down the road, and we get to this point in the road where there's so much rain and it's a dip that it's a giant, massive puddle. And it's not just covering a little bit of the road, it's covering everything. And, you know, Keith just looked at me, and it was kind of like this tongue-in-cheek expression of his. And he said, like the puddles that we have in life, we can spend all day just looking at them, all of our lives just wondering if we can leap over. But some of us never do. And what's the worst that can happen? You get a little wet.
Hmm.
And, Keith wasn't at that point I had started my success reading. And I always remember the time pre-book reading because I think like, oh, okay, those are at least like the most organic thoughts that I know I've had.
Hmm.
Now they're all synthetic, and that's fine because that's what happens when you gain experience. But Keith, he was raw. He's just this raw blue collar worker, beard, Paul Bunyan boots. And for him to say that, it was kind of cool because it's like, whoa, that's so deep.
Hmm.
The worst that can happen is you'll get a little wet. And so then he takes off, he runs, he jumps. There's no way he's gonna clear it, and he gets soaked. And and that resonated with me. And um, as you know from hearing that, there was a tragedy that struck later. And while we were making our film, our independent feature film, Keith had passed away, and it's because he was in a job that he wanted to get out of. He was close a couple times, but he didn't. It was a construction job, and it was a freak accident. And it's everyone can take their own lessons from that, of course. But to me, it really was that life is short,
Hmm.
and we have to plan for our future. However, we need to live. We actually have to live our life. So,
I have a very similar story, and I don't mean to disrail this, but I think
mm,
it's important. In college, I had a friend who I met. I think one of the first days I got to college, and he was a really smart guy, really good-looking guy too, but he didn't know it. He was homeschooled his entire life, and I think he was chubby as a kid, so he got in shape, and now he's really good-looking. We went to USC where there's just gorgeous girls. Anyways, he had this 5-year plan. His 5-year plan was in 5 years to have, $4 million. He had it all mapped out, and he had it framed and on the counter. And I remember having talks with him all the time. I'm like, dude, we're in college. Stop focusing so much on your plan, and like, let's meet some girls and have some fun now. No, 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 he'd tell me. He always would say, no, like, once I'm rich, that'll be easy, but like, I need to focus on making this money. The summer, I believe it was the summer after I met him. Maybe it was 2 summers after. I'm trying to think now, but not really important. The point was he drowned. Freak accident. He was training. When I first heard it, I thought, oh, he was probably drinking and went for a swim or something dumb. No, he was training for a triathlon with a partner that was swimming ahead of him. When the partner looked back, he didn't know where he was, so he figured, oh, maybe he's ahead. Maybe I just missed him. Gets to the shore, no idea where he is. Turns out he drowned. Now the story does have a slightly happy silver lining. The summer, a couple months before he passed away, my speaking to him kind of got him to start enjoying life a little bit more. And I remember specifically, he even had at one point a girl tell him, "Oh, you're such a good-looking guy, but you're so focused and boring that I don't want to even, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to even hang out with you." But a couple months, about a year before the whole thing happened, he did loosen up and he was like dating and enjoying his life. And it's a very sad story because, of course, he died. But I like to hope that my talking constantly with him, saying, you got to enjoy this while you have it, inspired him to at least enjoy that last year of his life. But it's always stuck with me that it's great to have a 5-year plan, but to be absorbed by it, you don't know what's going to happen. There's just freak things all the time.
Hmm.
But ending with that, I think let's get
Yeah.
on to some more motivational stuff. And so
Yeah.
you also have the double D's. What's the double D's? Because that's when you told me that you have the double D theory as well, I was very intrigued, to say the least.
Okay. Well, I'll give you the background. So I moved to New York just over a year ago, and there's constant stimulation everywhere.
Hmm.
It's amazing. I mean, there are so many events happening every single night of the week. And I'm not just, it can be anything that you want to do. You
Hmm.
want to be involved in laughing yoga in Queens? There's a class and it's happening right now. There's countless activities. And
Hmm.
for me, who I tend to find interest in almost any topic, it was like a kid in a candy store. So it was really difficult to stay on track with anything or get rid of this feeling of anxiety every night. And I didn't go out every night, but there'd be times I'd get back to the apartment at 7 p.m. and I would just have this low level anxiety, like everyone's out there, like I couldn't rest, like it was illegal for me to get a rest, and I felt guilty about that. So along with that was, you know, not having a set schedule. So one thing is when you have your own business, you don't have to clock in at 9 and leave at 5. And so if someone wanted to meet me, I would say, "When do you want to meet me?" And we'll make it happen. And a little bit easier in a small town, a little bit harder here when it takes an hour to get there. You talk for an hour and you have an hour back. It's not only 3 hours though, Travis. What I really found was it was affecting the focus of my brain. So if I met someone at 10, I get back in my apartment to work at noon,
Hmm.
and I'd be scatterbrained, and I'd kind of lose my strong willpower to stay on task.
Hmm.
And so I really had some space when I went back to Montana for this Christmas break. Had some nice references of read. Organized Mind is a good book. Pretty lengthy, but it's a good one. And I came back with the conclusion: the double D's are what's really the problem of destructing any momentum that I have, any happiness, really, because the double D's of destruction, they're distractions and decisions. And distractions are the cell phone notifications, the email notifications. I mean, having a notification each time you have someone trying to reach out to you, like think about that. Think about how backwards it is. You're trying to get your tasks done, your goals, your life, everything that matters.
Hmm.
And then someone's email comes in and you're notified of it. You're taken out of the moment, and it's not even urgent. It's nothing important. It might be a newsletter. Why are we allowing those things to sap all of our energy? And I think that's actually, we talk about our generation. That's what bothers me the most is when I see all this wasted energy just because of notifications, because of the promise that technology is going to help us out, when really it's bombarding us and making us scatterbrained. And we're like, what were we doing? I better just watch a quick YouTube video. Why not? You know, these distractions kill us. And I get really fired up about that. Um, and then to just finish the other side, the decisions. I'm big into routines and systems because they get rid of decisions. And decisions, why minimize these things? It's like, don't you, I mean, isn't that what healthy functioning people do? And that it's true, but we have to limit needless decisions because when you work out, say we're doing curls.
Hmm.
I don't do curls too often. We do curls though.
Uh-huh.
We're fatiguing a muscle. The muscle cells are getting tired. You know where I'm going with this. The neural
Absolutely.
cells, every time we make a decision, it's been proven, they get fatigued. They're living, breathing cells. they're closely related, and they are part of our willpower system. The ability to exert effort where we want to.
Hmm.
So once they get exhausted, we start making poor decisions on things that matter. And that's what I found when I was all scatterbrained at noon and didn't feel like working. So by getting a hold of eliminating these distractions and decisions, and that's a lot of technical stuff and getting my routine figured out, life has become slower, much more mindful. I have time to smile. I have time to think about my friends and family. As weird as that seems, I'm just, like the grateful idea. I'm
Hmm.
just like, yeah. And for me, that's kind of hard to do because I get so focused on what I'm doing. But with the space of getting rid of the distractions and the decisions, it's really allowed me to feel like, hey, I am getting a lot done, but I'm also a human. Like I'm also making connections with people, and they mean something.
Yeah, I want to talk about the first thing you were talking about with specifically distractions. And they've actually done a lot of studies. I believe there's a TED Talk, if I can find it, I'll link it in the show notes, that talks about how checking your emails or checking your Facebook for messages or checking your phone for text messages is an addiction. It's a lot like gambling. It's in the same part of the brain, the reward centers. If you get a text message from, let's say, your crush, you fire up and you're all happy. And if you check your phone and there's no text messages, you're depressed. It's something completely out of your control that controls your mood, that people let control their mood, not to mention their time. So I guess the question for you is, do you turn off notifications on your phone? And how often do you check your email then?
Good questions. It's absolutely true. It releases dopamine when
Hmm.
when you get that, and there's dopamine by staying on your task too. And they actually can release in both places. But staying on your task, that system in the prefrontal cortex is not as strong as in the limbic system, and that's the one that makes us check these our phones. Um, what do I do on my phone? Yeah, I actually painstakingly went through and turned off most all notifications. So what do I get? Phone calls, yeah.
Hmm.
Texts, I do because I don't get a huge amount of text. They're just from close people or maybe if there's organizing something. But everything else, specifically social media, like I let that go. Emails, no way. Like there's no way. Any of those red circles, I got an iPhone. No, badges are gone because they're all distractions. And even if you're like, well, I didn't click on it. Well, if you looked at it, there's a subconscious part of you that thought about it,
Hmm.
and especially if it's new, because anything novel attracts our attention. So if it's like that new one, then so yeah, notifications are basically 90% turned off, and then email, um, again, that's like a very lengthy. Everyone has to have their own system type of thing,
Sure.
but I truly believe in minimal checks and maximum focus when you're doing that.
Hmm.
So everything's. I'm like, I'm going to do email now. I still catch myself though, and I'll check the email on my phone especially.
Yeah.
But I say I'm not going to answer it now because the answering on the phone, I swear that it just creates anxiety, especially when you're out and about.
Absolutely.
I feel it. I look down at the phone because it's New York, right? I might be like slowly walking on the street. I might be in the subway. I get the sense that anxiety,
Hmm.
cortisol is being released, stress hormone. I feel it now. I'm like, whoa, okay. Put the phone away. I'll deal with that later. I'll make a note in my task manager and then deal with you later.
Yeah. And something actually I'll add to that. And I don't know if you've thought about this, but recently what I did is on Facebook, because sometimes I'll use Facebook as a messenger, a very healthy thing to talk to friends. But I found that the newsfeed in the middle, for me personally, never helped me out. I never looked through the newsfeed and felt better about myself afterwards. I found a program online that blocks the newsfeed and replaces it with a motivational quote. It's one of the best things I've done all year. Like there's one quote
Nice.
from Fight Club that it says like you're slowly dying every moment, and I'm like, you know what? A year ago, I would have spent 5 minutes on my news feed, and then afterwards been like, oh, my life's not as awesome as I thought, even though I'm pretty happy with my life. But it's
Hmm.
when you see everybody else doing amazing things, you don't walk away feeling good. So news feed blocker, I recommend getting. It's been great for me.
I'll make a note. That's really exciting. I
It's been a
like
lot
those.
of what so actually the decisions too. I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Is there a book you'd recommend or anything that helped inspire you to watch the decision making that you do throughout the day and make sure you don't waste your decision making on unnecessary tasks?
I'm trying to recommend one book. There's a compilation. If we're talking about books, though, I'll recommend only for the serious reader. My number one book is Flow
Okay, yeah.
by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. That is the ultimate, and it's really kicked off the positive psychology movement. And all these books that come out now, invariably they'll reference him. Mihai was great with his research and theory. He didn't really care to put things in coined phrases or like now, and I do that too. I like to have that nice quote I can say or this or that. But if you want like the raw, real truth, I say go to Flow. I mean, that's really my Bible in many ways.
Absolutely.
With decisions specifically, I think it's a combination. You got to have a book on willpower to really understand how that works. I prefer just Willpower itself by Roy Baumeister.
Okay.
Um, and then talking about how to organize the mind, especially for the new year, or like whenever you have that break and you're just overwhelmed, you can't go wrong with The Organized Mind by Daniel Levitin. It's a thicker book, and he doesn't leave any topic unturned. So sometimes they're kind of like tangents that go a little bit further out. But some people say like he deviates a little bit too much. I like though how thorough he is because I know after reading that book that I'll apply the good points, but I know nothing was missed,
Mm-hmm.
and that brings peace of mind. When you know that guy's thorough, you don't have to like I need to look at this reference and this reference because we only have so much time. I can't research, a million books. So the organized mind really gets a lot in.
I will also recommend Tim Ferriss has a blog post all about this, and I'll link that in the show
Oh,
notes
nice.
too. If you just want a quick cliff notes on what we're talking about here, check that out. It's really powerful stuff. So I don't know, another thing that you have is the 4 Bs. And we didn't talk about this yet, so I'm really excited to find out what the 4 Bs are.
Absolutely. The 4 Bs, it was fun. So this is mainly for high school age students, but really, I mean, it works for everything. It's not like something goes out of style because you get a little bit older. Not a truth, not like these universal truths. So the 4 Bs, the first one is be yourself. So, we try so hard to be other people. And there's a difference between trying to be better and just being, trying to be better and trying to be someone else.
Sure.
And so the first B is just to be yourself. And, we all tie these to stories, but I'll just kind of give you the bullet points. And then the second one is believe in yourself. The idea that no one's going to believe in you until you believe in yourself. The third one, and this is really important in high schools, really, it's be a teammate. Be a teammate. There's so much bullying. Some of it's obvious, a lot of it's not, and especially with social media and ways that you can not invite people or suggest things under the radar. It gets real mean real fast, and being a teammate is an idea, and I won't go. We just got to keep it on point because there's a really neat story. In a nutshell, though, when I was in middle school, I was judging this kid who always wore the same white shirt, and I was about to give my first ever speech, and it was like 6 a.m. the next morning, and my parents were like, "Well, can you show us what you've been working on?" So I go out there and oh, my brothers are texting. I hope they don't keep going. Okay.
Okay.
So I go out to the living room to give this speech to um, my parents, and I talk about I was trying to be Jerry Seinfeld. I was like, "What's with this kid who wears the same shirt every day? Doesn't he have another pair?" And it wasn't funny at all. It was just really, I'm not ashamed because I was in sixth grade, but I'm embarrassed still when I bring it up. I get a little red. Um, my parents didn't reprimand me right away. Like, thanks for sharing. Have a good night. Then, as I go into bed, my dad knocks on the door and he goes, I know you put a lot of work into that speech. Um, just want you to know, like, when we were growing up, this, we didn't have a lot of money. Um, and, I was that kid in the white shirt. And that was a huge epiphany for me, not to be so judgmental and not to look at the differences in other people as something bad or that I should make fun of, but as ways to understand and empathize with others. So that's what Be a Teammate's about, and it's trying to get rid of that bullying and get more empathetic.
And the fourth B?
The fourth B is be your best. Be
Okay.
your best. Yeah.
I love it, and I think the be yourself thing, 100%. I think people do get better with being a teammate as they get older, but the be yourself, I think, takes a little while to kick in. And I'll say from personal experience, very similar to you, actually. I always felt I moved to Chicago right after college, and I always felt like if I'm not going out on a Friday or a Saturday night, there's something wrong with me. Like, what's going on? And finally, it came to a point where I was just so anxious about having to go out. I wasn't even having fun that I'm like, screw it, I'm gonna stay in. And none of my friends cared. They're like, oh yeah, I should probably do that too tonight. And I think that people need to really look inside and say, do I actually want to do this, or am I doing this because someone that's 23 or 24 should be out partying? So I really like that. And believe in
Yeah.
yourself too is I think something that we struggle with in our 20s as well.
Yeah. I love what you just said there about going out and being comfortable with not going out. It's
Yep,
difficult.
it absolutely is. So I wanted to ask you some quick questions, and I know we already talked about flow and an organized mind, but is there some other books that you'd recommend?
Yes. And I love books. Okay, the one that made the biggest difference, okay, because I've, especially right out of college, I was like devouring all the success books I possibly could. Garrett and I, we had a really good tag team going on where we could read books, we'd go on road trips. It's Montana, so we
Mhm.
have a lot to get through audiobooks. And then we would talk about it afterwards. We'd type up our own notes. We'd be like, I'm going to read these 5 books, you read those 5 books, and we'll compare notes and talk about which ones you should read and which ones you don't have to. And then in our library, we would have um, folded up printer paper with our notes on the book. So we could always go back to it and be like, oh, okay, these were the highlights that I liked. And so it takes a little bit, it's a little bit harder now for a book to stand out.
Mhm.
The one that completely went a different direction that made such a difference this last year was Daring Greatly by Brene Brown.
Okay.
You might her name's really familiar from her TED Talk. She's got
Yeah.
like the top 5 most popular talk, and it's all about vulnerability and how vulnerability is true strength,
Mhm.
and how we live in a society of shame. It's like it's almost shame is what fuels us, and it's because unfortunately one of the side effects that can happen with capitalism is the feeling of never enough.
Mhm.
So when we talk about being yourself, it's also like saying I am enough. And so never enough versus I am enough is this constant battle. And if I am enough, I can be vulnerable. If I'm never good enough, then I feel shame. And so they're kind of like these two tracks. And I found that book so spot on and so refreshing. And a lot of books are like, I think back to like the early 1900s with Orson Swett Marden, and he's got they're all like early 1900s and all like about will, not willpower, but just like I want to say being a man, and
Mhm.
like staring your fears in the eyes. And I absolutely agree with that too. But it's coming from a very masculine, I'm almost like just finished a strong workout and I'm filled with testosterone perspective.
Mhm.
And in Brené's work was, really about being comfortable with your own vulnerabilities with yourself and how you share those with others. And I think that I had the most personal growth from that this past year, daring greatly.
That's a book I'm definitely going to add to my list. And it kind of reminds me of, I have a problem, and it sounds similar, but it might be slightly different. But my problem is this idea of doing, being my best self or just being happy with where I am. And I don't know if that's something similar that you might struggle with, but there's this constant idea of I can grow my business, I can make more money, or I can do this other thing, or I can do this. And then there's this other part of me that wants to just be happy in the moment and say what I have is enough. If is that something you struggle with? And if it is, how do you find balance between being happy with what you have and trying to achieve more?
Actually, I do. Yeah, I'm spot on. And there's no easy solution. This combination of terms like mindfulness
Mhm.
have a lot of that. Um, Alan Watts with his Eastern thoughts and how he brought in like Eastern culture and translated it. I really enjoy because not only does he translate those thoughts, but he's so articulate. Those kind of help me enjoy the moment
Mhm.
and get me back into like stop being so future focused, but get a little bit more of that present time. And there's two ways about the enjoying the moment though that's kind of funny because the whole concept with flow, like when you're in the zone, is you don't know you're in the zone
Mhm.
because once you start being self-conscious, it takes you out of it. So it's kind of this, this paradox because it is nice being in the moment and then like just getting out of it slightly and be like, I'm enjoying this.
Mhm.
Like or I can enjoy this. Let me smile. And then just kind of get back into things a little bit. Slow down, have to slow down, get out of all these have tos in the future, and then just go back to whatever it is. Um, but to me, the ultimate answer, and I am working on a new book, and I probably yeah, I'll show you. Okay, it's about flow creating. It's about
Okay.
getting into flow. And a lot of that is eliminating distractions. That's like one of the most important components is eliminating distractions.
When is the book coming out? Any
You know,
ideas?
I don't know. I want to show you. I was so excited. This is a. I'm gonna hold on. I'm gonna lose you for a sec and then
Okay.
get it set back up for you. Yeah, I got the first draft done at the end of last year in December, so just a month ago. I imagine by the end of the year it'll be complete, whatever that means. But it always takes a while, like publishing wise.
Hmm.
But I didn't think I'd do this, but here it is anyways. It's called Amateur's Quest.
Okay, I saw that in your Amazon on your Amazon page. It was talking about Amateur Quest, and I was googling it and I couldn't find it. So very interested. You'll have to
Yeah.
come back on when that's gonna go live, and we'll plug that on. And by then,
Okay.
I should have a much larger audience as well. But I know we're running out of time, so I just wanted to see if you had any last bits of advice for people in their 20s.
Well, man, you've been pretty thorough. Um, I would say, man, last bit of advice. Okay, I'll say this is just be an amateur. I mean, there's a reason that's in that title that I showed you is be an amateur. And what does that mean? It means do things for the love of it. Do things for the love of it. People say like, "Oh, they're just a bunch of amateurs." Oh, it's kind of derogatory. But amateur comes from the Latin word amare, and I'm going to translate that to Italian, amore,
Mhm.
and that means to love. So at the root of amateur is to love. And so when you are an amateur, you're doing things for the love of it. And I don't mean being hedonistic or just because I don't think there's love involved with that. I think there are quick fixes. But when you're doing things for that passion, for the love of it, um, that is where beautiful things start to happen.
I like it. Well, thank you very much, Nick, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope we get to talk in the future.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. And if you did, make sure you hit the big red subscribe button down below. You can also check me out on Facebook and on Twitter. And I release a new video every Monday. And by hitting that subscribe button, you'll get those new videos every Monday. And this is really a podcast. It's also a website. You can check out the website. It's howtodoyour20s.com. I'll put a link right over here as well. And what it's all about is trying to improve your life. And we specifically focus on things that people in their 20s are interested in. So make sure you like the video if you liked it, subscribe, like us on Facebook and Twitter, whatever. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you again on another video.